Hello YouTube companions, Sister Danger here. This weekend I got into it a little bit over the Kesha case with some friends of mine on YouTube, and I had only loosely been following this case, but at the point in time where it was asserted that it was surprising that I didn't just take the side of the artist, or that there was nothing to suggest that she would be fabricating her claims, I decided that was a little bit too much for me to leave this topic alone without any investigation or commentary. Just to review the situation a little for those who aren't aware, the singer Kesha has been locked up in a lawsuit with her producer, Dr. Luke Gottwald, hereafter known as Dr. Luke, and his record label, Kemosabe Records, since 2014. And during this time, she has not been working. Subsequent to her lawsuit with Dr. Luke, Kesha filed for an injunction that would have allowed her to work with another label. Now, a producer is not a label. A producer works for a label. So while the lawsuit against Dr. Luke was going through the court system and being resolved, Kesha wanted to have the ability to begin working with other labels entirely. The grounds that she gives for not being able to work with Dr. Luke are that it is because he has mentally, physically, and sexually assaulted, raped, and abused her. Dr. Luke has not been criminally charged, tried, or found guilty of any of Kesha's allegations at this point, and at least in a criminal sense, he is innocent until proven guilty. Although Kesha's original lawsuit, which was filed against him in 2014, is not a criminal lawsuit, it's a civil lawsuit, and this does have some important distinctions, so it's going to come up again later. In looking into this whole business, I found a lot of things in articles or on Twitter around the internet that have been said about this whole case. And so I'm going to go through the major bits one by one in sort of a Snopes style, where we take a look at the claim or the question and then whether or not it is true, not true, or partially true, and if partially true, how so? So, without further ado, let's get into this Kesha and Dr. Luke case. When looking into this, the most prevalent claim that I found is that Kesha isn't allowed to record. And this claim is false. Kesha is allowed to record. In this exchange between Garagos, who is Kesha's lawyer, and the judge, Garagos states that Dr. Luke is able to work and that Kesha is not able to work. And the court explicitly rejects this and says she is able to work, and they are offering her, they being Sony, they are offering her the opportunity to work without Dr. Luke. Although this is just one little sentence here in the transcript, this same idea is repeated over and over and over in various places throughout this transcript, where it is reiterated again and again that Kesha is allowed to record. What Kesha is not allowed to do is to record her music on another label. She cannot record music with another company. She cannot produce music under her own label. And the court asks Kesha's lawyers, so you're saying that you would agree for her to record under the auspices of Sony? And Kesha's lawyers answer correct. This basically insinuates that the reason Kesha hasn't been making music is because she is actively choosing not to work. And she cannot be legally compelled to work. It can only be such that the work she does do when she chooses to go back to work can be given, or the rights to that work can be given to one entity or another. What she is seeking is to be released from this obligation and contract to Kemosabe and Sony so that she can then work with other record labels to make her music. Now, this whole business right here sort of belies Kesha's claim that she needs to be out of her contract because she can't work with Dr. Luke. Sony is providing her with the opportunity and the ability to work on their labels without having to have any contact whatsoever with Dr. Luke, and Kesha is still refusing to work. And so you have to wonder why that is. This next one I also keep seeing pop up in articles, and this one is a little more of an onion that we're going to have to peel back the layers on some. The claim here is that Sony's offer to let Kesha record with other labels is an illusory promise. What they mean by this is that basically it's a fake offer. They don't really mean it. They're just saying that. Now, Kesha speculates that this offer is fake because if she works with someone else, Kesha claims, Sony will not promote her music. And you can see that here in this section of the transcript. Mr. Garagos, being Kesha's lawyer, says here that his problem is that Kesha is being set up to fail. And the allegations are that Sony isn't going to do anything else except try to set her up for failure. And the judge asks him rather incredulously, do you have any proof of that? Kesha's argument here is kind of silly because what she's saying is that even though Sony has invested over $60 million in her, because they like Dr. Luke better than they like her, because he's their actual hit maker, not her, that they are willing to tank their own ROI in Kesha for popularity's sake, because they just like that guy better. When asked for evidence as to the claims and the speculations that Sony would not promote music by Kesha, even though it was made on their label, and even though they had invested $60 million in her already, she provided absolutely no evidence to show why it is or why anybody should believe that Sony would make the terrible business decision of tanking their own ROI. The only thing that her lawyers did was they tried to sell the judge on a lot of inferred future actions, which you can see here in this next portion of the transcript, and by basically just saying they're not going to do it because they like Dr. Luke better. Kesha's lawyers insinuate here to the judge that because Kesha has a bunch of sexual allegations out against Dr. Luke, whom they like, that Sony will not want to promote Kesha's music because they will not want to do anything that lends credibility to what she says, thereby making her case more substantial against Dr. Luke when it comes to the sexual allegations. Now, keep in mind here that none of this has actually taken place. Sony has not refused to promote Kesha's music. Those are only allegations and conjecture that is being made by Kesha about what Sony may or may not do in the future. And in fact, later on in this injunction, Sony explicitly states exactly the opposite, that they will promote her music because it is expressly against their business interests to not promote her music. So I find the judge's response next here to be very encouraging. The judge goes on to say to Kesha's lawyers, this is a court of law and we have to make decisions based upon facts, not on fantasy and speculation, which is what you are doing. So basically, in this injunction here, the court finds Kesha's claim that Sony isn't going to promote her music pretty absurd, and the judge kind of shuts it down and rejects this notion. For this next claim, we're going to have to backtrack in time a little bit and pay attention to the timeline going forward. So the claim is that Dr. Luke physically assaulted and or raped Kesha. This claim is unproven and unfounded. To go in the Wayback Machine, in 2011, both Kesha and her mother, PB, testified under oath that Dr. Luke had neither drugged, raped, or had any kind of sexual relationship with Kesha. And it's important to note that her mother also testified to this because in the news media, it is being presented that the reason Kesha testified that he didn't do anything is because she was scared. But the fact that her mother also testified to exactly the same thing separately from her sort of undermines the claim that Kesha was lying back then and doing something to cover up for Dr. Luke. Fast forward now to 2014, where Kesha files a civil lawsuit against Dr. Luke, and it is in this lawsuit that she alleges that he raped her, he physically and verbally abused her, that he sexually assaulted her, and was just generally all around a big mean meanie. The 2014 lawsuit is the lawsuit for which this injunction that she was most recently denied is referring to. At this time, there's no proof that Dr. Luke is guilty of any of Kesha's allegations. No reports were ever filed. There's no history of similar past crimes. There is literally only Kesha's word at this point and her claims against him. Unfortunately for Dr. Luke, the burden of proof in a civil lawsuit is only a preponderance of evidence, and it's much lower than if this were a criminal trial. Fortunately for Dr. Luke, he doesn't seem to have any sort of history of this type of behavior that would corroborate Kesha's claims, and neither does there seem to be anybody that is coming forward to back them up either. Which brings me to the next claim. The claim here is that there's also Lady Gaga's word, Dr. Luke raped her as well. And this claim is false. Lady Gaga has intimated in interviews that she was raped by a producer early on in her career, but she has never revealed the identity of her assailant. After Lady Gaga spoke about her rape in interviews, Kesha's lawyer then made the claim that the anonymous assailant that Lady Gaga was referring to was none other than Dr. Luke, and then engaged in a Twitter smear campaign against his name, trying to paint him as a rapist in the court of public opinion. Since then, Lady Gaga has gone on record publicly stating that the claims to the effect that Dr. Luke is her anonymous rapist are false. She flat out denies them and has reiterated that she never made those claims herself. Kesha's lawyer claimed that they would get a deposition from Lady Gaga attesting to the fact that yes, Dr. Luke was the rapist, but Kesha's lawyers have since failed to produce any sort of affidavit or deposition to that effect. On to the next claim. Dr. Luke mentally abused Kesha. This is unproven, there's no evidence, but it is possibly founded, so maybe it's true. In January of 2014, Kesha entered rehab at Timberline Knolls for bulimia. She claimed in her rehab to her doctors that it was the verbal abuse by Dr. Luke over the preceding 10 years of their working relationship that drove her to bulimia. What's interesting about this is that despite checking into Timberline Knolls in January, and despite psychiatrists concluding that Dr. Luke was the cause of her mental and physical abuse, but not necessarily rape, Kesha has not been able to show any other indications of mental trauma. There are no prescriptions, no regular psych visits, no historical trends of breakdowns or addictions. There was a lot of drinking. The judge makes a particular note of this in Kesha's injunction by stating, your argument is that she cannot physically work with Gottwald because she has all of these issues. There is not one piece of paper from a doctor saying this, but that's besides the point. Even though you claim she has all kinds of physical problems, trauma, nothing under seal or otherwise. There are no hospital records. There's nothing here. Add on to this that Kesha and her mother both admit that they knowingly and willfully did not report any of these alleged incidences of abuse until 2014. So this went on from roughly 2004 to 2014, and for 10 years, they knowingly did not say anything. It's also worth bearing in mind that the doctors at Timberline are paid for by the clients that they are treating, so they're not exactly the most objective sources of a professional opinion. They make money off of their patients. Next up, the claim is that Dr. Luke tried to silence Kesha's support of Lady Gaga's rape song at the Oscars. This is false. What actually happened was that Kesha made some comments coming out in support of Lady Gaga's song. You know, she liked it, it hit home. And Dr. Luke's lawyer basically said that considering Kesha has gone on record saying that she isn't a victim, that perhaps she is not the best person to hold up as an example on this important issue. That's not trying to silence anybody. That is them trying to make sure that their side of the story is also seen and heard in the media. Trying to silence somebody would be more like Zoe Quinn getting a gag order against Aaron so that he can't talk about accusations that he's being charged with. That is trying to silence somebody. The next and last question that I've seen come up multiple times now is, why hasn't Kesha been charged with perjury? This question pertains to the fact that Kesha has said either under oath and or in various legal documents that Dr. Luke has both never raped, drugged, or had any kind of sex with her, but also that he has done those things. Obviously, these two conflicting statements cannot be simultaneously true, which means that in either one instance or the other, Kesha was lying. So why doesn't she get charged with perjury? Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, perjury itself comes with a certain set of things that need to be proved in order to show that perjury has taken place. And typically speaking, those things are usually somewhat difficult to demonstrate. So it's hard to show that perjury really has happened. And second, this speaks less to actual law and more to politics. But there's really a big stigma in sexual assault cases to charge the victim of the assault with perjury. The idea being that doing this is tantamount to victim blaming or calling the victim a liar. Not very many lawyers, especially elected ones, really want to go and call victims of sexual assault liars because, well, it's bad for re-election. So to recap all of this, I do think that there is plenty of reason to question Kesha's accusations against Dr. Luke. The main reasons being that there isn't any evidence. She hasn't brought any evidence against him other than her word. He doesn't have any prior history of behavior like this that they can show. Her accusations against him are ill-defined and non-specific. They just are assaults that happened over the last 10 years. There's no dates. There's no specific instances that can be verified. It wouldn't have hurt her career if in 2011 she would have said in that original testimony that he had done these things. By then she was already famous. So there was no reason for her to be fearful that something would happen to her career. Every suit that she has brought against him has included as a form of reparation that she be released from her contract. The fact that neither her nor her mother, who apparently knew about all of this, went to the authorities for more than 10 years implies that it wasn't because of her own concern for any kind of assault, but rather that they were not going to the authorities because they were trying to leverage something or protect some other interest. So there it is. I'm going to put a whole host of links into the section below. There's a ton of them for this particular video. Please let me know your thoughts, and if you like what you saw here, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and you can always hop over to Patreon and support me there as well. I will see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.